Edit mode is one of the most important features of the Blender that will allow you to make all sorts of beautiful objects and models in Blender, and in this tutorial I will teach you how to use edit mode, and I will also introduce you to all sorts of different tools that edit mode gives you access to. In this tutorial we will be making this sword with the edit mode, and at the end of this video you will be able to make all sorts of different objects in Blender. So let's get started. Okay, now first open your Blender, and what we will do next is we will delete everything in our scene. So to do that, simply press collection here, press right click and select this to clean up everything in our scene. And okay, now in order to make a sword with the edit mode, we will need a new object. Now to add a new object, press add here, go under mesh and simply select the cube. And okay, now we have this cube, and this cube is going to serve as the we are going to use the edit mode to turn this cube into the blade for our sword. Okay, so first what we need to do, we need to open the edit mode. Now to open the edit mode we have two options. We can either select this modeling icon here, and boom, we are automatically in the edit mode. And to return and to leave the edit mode, press this layout icon here. Or you can just select the object mode and switch it to edit mode here. It doesn't really matter which one of these ways you pick, they are both valid and they both work. Okay, now that we are in the edit mode, you can see that we have a lot of different tools at our disposal, and all of these tools are going to allow us to give this cube a lots of different shapes. Now, before we actually start explaining what all of these different tools do, first let's cover the most basic thing you need to understand with the edit mode. Guys, what you need to understand about the edit mode is that whenever you are in the edit mode, your object is going to be divided into the three things: the faces, the edges and the points. And which one of these three things you can interact with is determined here. This button means that you can interact with the points. This one means that you can interact with the edges, and this one is for the faces. But what exactly are faces, edges and points? Well, to explain that, let's quickly select this move tool for better visibility. And now, what faces basically are? Faces are basically these 6 planes, these 6 sides, which make up this cube. Every object is made of a lot of faces, and in the case of this cube, those faces are these 6 planes which make it up. Now the edges, on the other hand, the edges are these black lines that are connecting 2 or more faces together, like this. And the points are basically these dots at the corners of this cube. And what dots are is they connect 2 or more edges together. So points are these dots, edges are these lines, and the faces are these planes. I hope that makes sense. And now, how can we actually change the shape of this cube in the edit mode? Well, you see guys, what edit mode allows us is to individually change each one of these factors. For example, if I select this cube, I can use this move tool to move this face and this one here anywhere I want. Let's move this face here as well. And okay, now as you can see, we have given this cube a lot more different shape. Now to undo this, let's press Ctrl Z. Ctrl Z is basically going to undo anything you do in Blender. And just like we use this smooth tool to move the faces, we can do the same thing with the edges. And we can also move the points as well. So I think you can see why is the edit mode such a useful tool that is allowing you to make all sorts of different shapes for your object. Let's press Ctrl Z to undo all this. And this works with all other tools as well. For example, if I select the rotation tool, you can see I can simply rotate this face. And if I select the scale, I can also change its size. So yeah, you can really use the edit mode to make any shape that you like. Let's press Ctrl Z to undo all this. And now that we have explained the most basic factor of the edit mode, now we are finally ready to start turning this cube into a sword. Now, we will turn this cube into the blade for our sword. And in order for this cube to be a blade, first it needs to be a tiny bit taller. So let's select this face at the top and pull it up like this. And this face, this cube should also be wider. So to make this cube wider, select this face, go to the other side, hold Shift, select this face here to have both of these faces selected. And now use Scale tool and scale this up on the X-axis to put more distance between these two faces. And okay, now we have this wider cube. Now we need to only make this cube a tiny bit thinner. So we will select these two faces, scale them down on the Y-axis to make it thinner. And okay, this is going to work. Now, in order for this cube to actually be a good blade, the top of our cube should be pointy. There should be a more sharper end at the top of this cube. Now, to make such a sharp end, we would actually need a new set of edges right here in the middle of this face. However, we don't have any. Now, I'm going to show you one simple tool that is going to allow you to make extra sets of edges and points anywhere on your object. Now simply select this loop cut tool, and now as you can see, with loop cut selected, whenever we are going over our cube, we have this yellow line appearing on it. Now I want you to position your yellow line like this, so that it is cutting this cube straight in half. And now press click with the mouse, left click, and okay, now if you select the move tool, you can see that this tool has given you this new set of faces and edges in the middle of this object. Now if you want your loop cut to add this set of edges at a specific point, what you can do is you can simply hold the mouse button and you can then simply move these edges around like this until you place them where you want them to be. Now I added this just for demonstration, so I'm just going to press Ctrl Z to undo this. Okay, and now what I'm going to do next, I'm going to select this move tool, select this edge here in the middle of this face at the top, and I'm going to pull it up. Okay, like this. And now we have this sharper top for our sword. Okay. Now, this object can already pass as the blade for our sword. However, guys, we can still add a lot more interesting details to this object with these other tools we have in the edit mode. So I'm going to show you how to make this blade look better. First, let's switch this from edges to faces. And what I want you to do next is select this Inset Faces tool. Now select these two faces that are here on this side of this blade. Select this circle, hold it, and scale it down. And as you can see, what this tool is doing is it is adding a new faces right in the middle of these faces which we have selected. Now move these new faces here, relatively somewhere on the position like this. And now what we need to do next is we need to cause these faces to sink into our object to make a hole here in the middle of our blade. Now you might be thinking that we can simply just select the move tool and pull these two faces into our blade, but as you can see, this doesn't really look really good. So let's undo this with Ctrl Z, and in order to make these faces sink into this blade, we are going to use a new tool. We are going to use Extrude Region tool. Now when you select the Extrude Region tool, you are going to notice that we have this yellow dot here coming out of this side of our object. Now let's see what is going to happen if we pull this arrow out of our object. You can see that this Extrude Region tool is creating new faces which are coming out of the faces which we have selected. Now if you're thinking, but didn't you say that we want these faces to sink into our object? Well, yes, we want that, and we can also do that with this tool. Press Ctrl Z to undo this, select this arrow, and this time, instead of pulling this arrow out of the object, pull this arrow into your object. And okay, as you can see, now we are causing these faces to sink into our object, and now we have this interesting hole in the middle of our blade. Okay, now we can still make this blade look a little more interesting, so we are going to do something new. Select these two faces, select Inset Face, create new sets of faces here in the middle. Now once again select Extrude Region tool, and this time slightly pull these faces out. And okay, now we have this interesting shape for the blade of our sword. However guys, our blade still has one small problem. If we look at the other side of this object, you are going to notice that all the shapes we made on this side, none of those shapes are on this side of the object. Now you may think that we are just going to use these two tools to recreate this shape on this side of the blade, and while we could do that, there is actually another, much more quicker way to get this shape of the blade on the other side of this object. Now, how are we going to recreate this shape on this side of the object? Well, to do that, select Loop Cut, and what I want you to do is to cut your object in half from this angle here, okay, like this. Now, what you need to do next is the following. Select this Move tool and select all of the faces that are on this side of your object, on this side where we don't have this interesting shape. Now press right click and simply select Delete Faces. And okay, now we have deleted this half of our blade. Now we need to get that other half back, and this is how we are going to do that. We are going to recreate this other half of our blade with something called Mirror Modifier. If you don't know what modifier is, what modifiers are, simply go here under the modifiers, press Add Modifier, and you can see that we have a lot of different modifiers at our disposal, and they each serve their own unique purpose. Now, what modifiers do is they are basically going to alter the way your object looks, and they are going to change the way your object functions. Now, to get this other half of our blade, we need a mirror modifier. So to get a mirror modifier, go here under this generated group and simply select this mirror option. Okay, now nothing has happened so far. Now to alter how this mirror modifier is working, you need to play with this axis setting here. Simply disable them and enable them until you get the other side of the object. And okay, now that I enabled this mirror modifier on the y-axis, now this mirror modifier is nicely adding this other half of this blade. Let's quickly go into the object mode. And this is for what mirror modifier is mostly used. Whenever you delete one half of your object in edit mode, mirror modifier will create the identical copy of that deleted half and place it on the appropriate place on your object. This is really useful tool because by using the mirror modifier, the amount of work you need to do is cut in half. Now, mirror modifier has also some other interesting features that you should probably know. However, I'm not going to explain them on this object. To explain them, I'm going to simply add a new cube, place it somewhere around here, go into the edit mode, cut it in half with loop tools. Now I'm going to delete this one half of this object. And I'm going to get this other half with mirror modifier. Okay, let's play with the axis. Okay, now mirror modifier has this merge and clipping settings here, and I would like to use this cube to quickly explain what these two settings actually do. For demonstration, let's select the edge at the top and let's move it away from the middle so that the two halves of this cube are separated at the top. Now, next to the merge, we have this value here. Now, when you add mirror modifier to your object, mirror modifier is going to merge the two halves of your object. Now, what this value next to the merge controls is how close the two halves of your object need to be to one another in order for mirror modifier to merge them. If we increase this value to 1, now you can see that the two halves of your object are being merged once again, because now as long as these two halves have 1 meter of distance between them, they will merge together. If I set this value to 0.2, then these two halves will need to have 0.2 meters of distance between them in order for them to merge. And now, next, let's explain the clipping. If we try to reconnect these two edges together, you will see that they are clipping through one another. Now, to prevent that from happening, let's enable the clipping. And now, if we try to reconnect these two edges, now as you can see, once they are touching, they are merging and they no longer clip through one another. Now, one downside to this is that now we can't actually separate these two edges. In order to do that, we need to disable the clipping and only then we can separate these two edges again. But other than that, there are no other downsides to using this option. And in case you don't want your two sides to merge at all, then you just need to disable this merge option here and mirror modifier will stop merging these two sides. Now this wasn't anything super fancy, I just wanted to show you some other interesting features of the mirror modifier. Now let's delete this cube, we don't need it anymore, and let's go back to our sword. Select our sword, go into the edit mode, and okay. Now guys, there is still one more detail I would like to add on this blade. I would like to make a hole in the middle of this blade, and I would like to give that hole a shape of an arrow. So to do that, this is what we are going to do. Select these faces, select these two faces here, select inset faces, and let's make a new hole in the middle of our sword. Now what we need to do next is this. Press right click and delete these faces to make this hole in our sword. And now what we need to do next is we need to give this hole a shape of an arrow. Now to do that, this is what we are going to do. Select your loop cut tool, and we are going to add one set of edges here and one set of edges here. Now what we need to do next is we need to add two new sets of edges here and here. However guys, we have one problem. I told you that we need to add two new sets of edges, but loop cut, as you can see, is only making one set of edges at the time. Now to fix that problem, let's first press Ctrl Z to undo this. We have this number of cuts option, and by default it is set to 1. What number of cuts option will do is it is pretty much going to control how many sets of edges is loop cut going to add. If we switch this number from 1 to 2, and if we use loop cut now you can see loop cut is no longer adding one set of edges, it is actually adding 2. Now let's add another 2 loop cuts on this side here. Okay, and now that we have this new set of edges on both sides of this object, now it is time to shape this hole like an arrow. So how are we going to do this? Select these points. Now select these 2 points and these 2 points here. Now we need to extrude these points. To do that, press E. Okay. And now we need to snap these new points in their original position. To do that, simply press right click. Now select the scale tool and scale these points down on the x-axis to pull them closer to one another. Okay, now we need to fill up this small gap down here. So to do that, let's select this point, pull it a tiny bit up. Let's select these 2 points, pull them up as well. And now these edges here are a tiny bit too sharp, so let's select these 2 points, pull them down, okay, like this. Okay, and now we have this shape for an arrow. Okay, maybe let's select these 2 points, slightly pull them down to give this arrow a better shape, and maybe pull this point down a little as well. And okay, now we need to change the shape of this area here. So select these 4 points, pull them up. Select these 4 points, pull them down. And let's also scale them down a little on the x-axis, like this. Okay, maybe not so much. And okay, we have this decent hole in our blade that is in the shape of an arrow. Now another problem we have is that this blade is looking like it's hollow because of this hole. Now to fix this problem, this is what we are going to do. We are going to select these 4 points here, select the move tool. Let's press E to extrude these points. Right click to snap them back into the place, and let's move them to the middle. Whoops, but this object, these points are clipping through one another. So let's enable clipping to stop them from clipping through each other. And okay, now we have closed this hole here at this side of our blade. Now we need to do the same thing down here. Select the points that are here, extrude them, pull them here. And now guys, we still need to close this hole that is at this area here. So to close this hole, we need to merge these four faces here. Now to merge these faces, select these 2 points and select these 2 points as well. And now simply press F. And okay, now as you can see, now we have merged this hole that we have here. Now we need to close the rest of the holes on this object. So let's select these points that are around here. Okay, like this. Ooh, maybe not. Actually, maybe not these ones. Not yet anyway. Now press C to extrude them. Move these points here. Select these 2 points. Press C to extrude them. Move them here. And now we just need to close a bunch of holes. Select these 2 points and these 2 points, press F to close them. Select these 2 points and these 2 points, close them with F. Okay, select these 2 points and these 2 points, close them with F as well. And okay, now we have this cool looking blade for our object. Now guys, the one last thing I would like to add on this blade is I would like to make it look a tiny bit sharper. So to achieve that, we are going to select all the points that are right here in the middle of our objects. Okay, like this. Just go nice and steady. Okay, and now what you need to do, we need to scale these points up a bit. So to do that, simply press S to scale them up. Okay, and now we already have the top of this blade looking pretty sharp. Maybe we can scale this up a tiny bit more. Now let's select these points of this blade that are at its sides, like this. And now let's select scale tool and scale them up on the x-axis to make them sharper. And okay, now guys, we have this cool looking blade. Now guys, I'm going to tell you one more additional feature of the Blender that you need to keep in mind when you're working with the objects. Right now, the edges for our object are really sharp, and for this object that is perfectly fine because blades need to have sharp edges to cut through objects. However, what if you want to make a different object that is supposed to have smooth edges? Well, adding smooth edges to your object is really easy. Just go into the object mode, press right click and select smooth shading, and Blender will add smooth edges to your object. Now, this blade doesn't really look good right now, because it's supposed to have sharp edges, not smooth. But if you want to make an object that is supposed to be smooth, all you need to do in order to achieve that is simply add smooth shading to your object. Now, we need to give this sword sharp edges again. To do that, simply press right click and select flat shading. Actually, come to think of it, a better example for the smooth shading might be a UV sphere. So let's add a UV sphere and we are going to place it here. Right now this UV sphere looks like it's made of a lot of different planes that are coming together in this spherical shape. Now, in order to get rid of these planes and to make this object smoother, all we need to do is press right click, select smooth shading, and Blender will make this object smoother, and it will remove these planes on the sphere. Hopefully this has been a better example for the shading in Blender. And now that we have explained this, let's delete this UV sphere, and now I'm going to show you one more trick that can help you to make a lot more better objects. Now, right now this blade has really sharp edges, and while I did tell you that your blade needs to have those sharp edges, there is still one more detail that you need to keep in mind. If you take a look at the objects in real life, you will notice that rarely any object actually has these sharp edges. Almost every object, even the ones that are sharp, have at least some smoothness on their edges. And if you can recreate that smoothness on your objects, you will make them look a lot better. Now, to actually achieve that effect, we will need to use a new modifier. Go under modifiers, add modifier, generated, and now select bevel modifier. Now increase segments from 1 to 3. And let's play with this amount value until we get the right amount of smoothness on our edges. And okay, now we have given this object a small amount of smoothness to its edges, just like we wanted. Now this is really small detail, but adding small details to your objects like this will make them look better in the long run. Now let's also add smooth shading to this sword to improve these edges. And okay, now we have a lot more better looking sword. Now, just before we continue this tutorial, I would like to quickly tell you something. If you want to learn even more advanced features of the edit mode and how to make more complicated characters and objects with it, I highly recommend checking out my class on Skillshare, where I'm going to show you some additional features of the edit mode that I'm not going to cover here in this tutorial. So, if you want to level up your skills in Blender even more, I highly recommend you to check out my class on the Skillshare. Link for my class will be in the description down below. And also guys, if you're interested in one-on-one online lessons in Blender, I am also running a small gig on Fiverr, where I also offer one-on-one online lessons, where I teach a lot of different features of the Blender. So, if you're interested in one-on-one lessons, please contact me on Fiverr and I would be happy to help you gain new skills in Blender. Okay, with the shameless self-promotion out of the way, let's continue with this tutorial. And okay, now that we have made this blade, now we are ready to finally start making the handle for our sword. Now, for the handle, we are simply going to make a new cube, and let's immediately go into the edit mode. Now, for this new cube, let's select all faces. Let's select all faces by pressing A, Move tool. Actually, come to think of it, return into the object mode, and let's simply move this cube slightly down. Okay, until half of it is buried in this blade. Now go into the edit mode, and now what you need to do next. Select this face here and this face here and simply scale them up. Oops. Scale them up on the x-axis like this. Okay. Now scale this face at the top of this cube. Pull it tiny bit up till it's reaching this arrow. Okay, maybe tiny bit down. Okay. And now we need to improve the shape of this handle. To do that, let's add loop cut. Whoops, let's decrease the number of cuts back to 1, and let's add one set of edges here. Now, let's select this face at the bottom and scale it down on the x-axis. Okay, like this. And looks like we have one problem. Our blade is clipping through this handle, but it doesn't really matter, we will fix that in the moment. Now, just like we decorated our blade, we also need to decorate our handle. Now for the handle, select insert faces, select these two faces, add a small faces here, use extrude region to pull these faces tiny bit in here. Okay, and now let's select these inset faces, make new set of faces here. Okay, now what we need to do next is this. We need to set up these points so that they make a perfect circle. We need to set up these points we have here so that they are shaped in a shape of a circle. Now, to achieve that, this is what we are going to do. We are going to add one loop cut here that goes to this side of our object. And now we actually need the help of an add-ons. We need to add-on called Loop Tools. To enable Loop Tools, go under Edit, Preferences, go under Add-ons and simply type Loop Tools, and then enable Mesh Loop Tools add-on here. After you have enabled that add-on, select this face tool and select these faces that are in the middle of our object. Now press right click, and now that you have enabled Loop Tools, you should have this icon here, and simply set this up to circle, and that is going to position all these points in the shape of a perfect circle. Now this is still a tiny bit too big, so let's press S to scale this down. Okay, like this. And now what we can do next, we can select extrude region, like this. Now slightly extrude these faces. Now let's use insert face tool, make new faces in the middle. And now select extrude region and pull these new faces into our handle. Okay, now we have this handle, but we still need to get the other side. We will take care of this the same way we took care of the blade. First, we will cut this object in half on this side. Then we are going to select all of these faces on this side of our object, like this. Press right click and delete them. Whoops, delete this face too. Now let's use mirror modifier, play with axes, and okay. Alright. Now, next thing we need to do is we need to smooth out this object. First, we will add a smooth shading to this object, and now we need to add a new modifier to this object. So, go under Add Modifier, Generated, and select Subdivision Surface Modifier. This is one of the most commonly used modifiers, and what this modifier does is it's subdividing the faces of your object and by doing so, it's making your object look smoother. Now, to control how strong this modifier is, let's increase this level viewport value from 1 to 3. And now, as you can see, this object looks a lot more smoother than it did before. And now, I also recommend you to keep this render here at the same value as the level viewport. Basically, what level viewport value controls is how does this modifier make this object look in the viewport, and the render controls how does this modifier makes this object look in the final render. So that is why it is really important that the render is set at the same value as the level viewport. So that way your object will look in the final render just like it does here in the viewport. Okay, now what we need to do next is we need to make some angles on this object sharper. Now to do that, go back into the edit mode and it's time to start selecting some edges, sorry. Let's select this edge here, and this one here, and this one here, and this one here. Now, to make these edges look sharper, press N and switch this main crease, sorry if I mispronounced it, and switch this to 1. And as you can see, by doing this, we have made these edges on this object appear a lot more sharper. Now we need to do the same thing on these edges around here, around this side of the object. Switch this to 1. Okay, this object is now looking really sharp. And now we should also smooth out the edges that are inside of this circle, but for better visibility, let's temporarily disable subdivision surface. To disable subdivision surface, press this camera, and we didn't actually delete subdivision surface, we only temporarily disabled it. If we press this camera again, you can once again see the effect of subdivision surface. So with subdivision surface disabled, let's select all of these edges around here, around the inside of this object. Okay, like this. Okay, now let's re-enable subdivision surface, increase this value to 1. And okay, this once again looks good. With this, we have more or less made the handle. Now, we still have a problem. This blade is still clipping through our object. So, this is how we are going to fix that. Select your blade, go into the edit mode, and now simply select this point here and this one here. Now scale them down on the x-axis. Whoops, but now we have a problem. Looks like this is altering the way this looks on our blade. So instead of scaling this down on the x-axis, what we are going to do is we are going to slightly pull these points up. Okay, and now they are no longer clipping through our object, and this blade still looks really good. Okay, great. Now let's move on. Now what we need to do next is this. We need to add an object for which the person would hold this sword. So we are going to add a new cube and place it down here where that object would be. And let's immediately add subdivision surface to this object. Increase both of these values to 3. And now let's give this object smooth shading. Okay, like this. Now go into the edit mode. And what you need to do next, select this face here at the top and this one at the bottom, and increase this main cursor here to make this object immediately look sharper. And to make this smoother, maybe we can increase this value to 4. Now select this face, move it down. Select this face, you can move it up a tiny bit. Okay, like this. And now what we need to do next is we need to make this handle look a tiny bit more detailed. So to do that, this is what we will do next. Maybe let's slightly move this up. Now select this loop cut. Increase the number of cuts from 1 to 5. And let's add these 5 new cuts here. Now switch this number of cuts back to 1. And let's add 1 new set of edges between each one of these new cuts we made. Okay, and now we need to select every second edge on this object. So this is how we are going to do that. Now, you may think that in order to select every single second edge, we are just going to select these edges one by one and go like this until we select all of them. And while we could do that, there is another much more quicker way to solve this problem. Hold your mouse button, and if you move your mouse around while holding it, you can see that you can select multiple items at the same time. However, guys, one problem with this method is that you can't really select through your object. For example, I am moving around the area where all the edges for this circle are. However, as you can see, I'm only selecting the edges that is right in front of us. Now, in order to select all the edges which make up this circle, we actually need to enable something new, something called the X-ray. To enable the X-ray, press this, and now we can see through our object. But more importantly, now we can select the different edges through our object. Now, if we try to select all these edges, now you can see that now we are selecting every single edge that is within this circle. So now simply hold Shift and keep selecting these different edges. Okay, like this. Okay, and now that we have selected all these edges, we can get out of the X-ray mode by pressing this. Now select the scale tool, and let's scale all these edges down on the X and Y axis. Okay, till we get a shape that looks like this. Okay, sweet, sweet, sweet. Now, to make this better, let's actually select this bevel tool, and bevel tool is going to split these edges into two. Now, as you can see, when we are using this tool, these edges we have selected are being split into two new sets of edges, and this is great. This is exactly what we want. Now let's use them here to reshape this. Okay, now we have a decent handle for this object. Now we are going to do one more interesting thing. Select this face at the bottom and select Insert Face to make new face here in the middle. Now select Extrude Region and pull this face in. Okay, like this, to make a hole here. Now, this hole is a tiny bit too sharp, so let's actually decrease this value from 1 to 0. And let's actually select all of these edges. Press S to scale them up. And okay, now we have this a lot smoother opening down at this handle. Now, what we are going to do next is this. We are going to add a few gemstones that are going to be placed here, and one that is going to be placed here in this handle. Now guys, before we actually add a gemstone, there is actually one thing you need to understand. Do you see this red icon here? This icon is called the 3D cursor, and if you select this icon here and if you click around your scene, you can control where your 3D cursor is going to be. Now basically what 3D cursor controls is where your new objects are going to appear. Up until this point, all of the objects in our scene were appearing here because the 3D cursor was here, but now if we add a new object, now you can see, now this cube has appeared here because now we have 3D cursor here. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now there is actually one very quick and simple way we can add a gem into our scene. Simply go under Preferences, again go under Add-ons and type Extra. Okay, now make sure to enable Add Mesh Extra Objects, and you should have under the mesh this diamonds option. Under the diamonds you can pick up this diamond shape to get the object like this, and okay, now we already have a diamond. And now one more thing, whenever you guys add a new object into your scene, you are going to get this small icon here. If you press this icon, you are going to get a few additional settings that are going to help you to alter how does your object look. Now for our purposes here, we want to mainly focus on the segments. As you can see, if we play with these segments here, we can control how many circles are going to be around this diamond. Okay, we don't want to add too much circles. Okay, this is too little. Okay, 7 is going to be just fine. Now, I would like to leave the rest of these settings by default, but if you want to, you can play with them to get a different result for your diamond. But I am going to leave the rest of these settings to how it was at default, because I think this is already giving us a pretty decent result. Now let's move this down. Okay, like this. And now let's place this diamond here at this place where this hole for the crystal we made is. Okay. And now what we need to do next, let's press Shift D to duplicate this crystal. Place it here. Let's actually rotate this. Okay, like this. Okay, place it here where this hole we made for it is. And now we need to make a new crystal here. Now guys, there is actually one very simple way you can use to immediately add a new crystal on the other side of this handle. And what is that new way? Well, simple, select your crystal, and under modifiers we are going to add a mirror modifier. Now with the mirror modifier, what you need to do next is this. Select this icon at the mirror object, and now select your handle and simply play with axes on your mirror modifier. And now as you can see, now we have this mirror, this diamond appearing on both sides of our handle. So mirror modifier doesn't just create copy of your object on the other side of your object, it also can copy your entire diamond and place it on the other side of this handle. This is just one pretty sweet tool that can be used to make a really cool and interesting objects. Okay guys, now that we took care of this, what we need to do next is this. We need to add some small, very simple handles that are going to come out of the both sides of this object. Now to do that, we can just select these objects here. Now we need to duplicate them. Press Shift D to duplicate them. And now let's rotate this object. Place it here. You can press S to scale this object down. Okay, and place this object here on this side. Okay, maybe we can slightly scale this up. Like this. And we can maybe scale this up on this angle as well. Move this here. And now we need to put this and now we need to put these objects on the other side as well. We are simply going to do that with the mirror modifier. And okay, now we have this pretty decent sword. Okay, now I think that these handles here are a tiny bit too big, so let's scale them down really quickly. Place them here. These handles shouldn't be as big as this one here. And okay, our sword is practically already finished. However, guys, just before we officially finish this sword, there is still a few things I would like to set up on it. First, let's select this sword. And what we need to do now is we need to apply the mirror modifier. Now, right now, if we go into the edit mode, you can see that we can change the faces on this side of our object, but we can't do that here because this one doesn't have its own set of edges and faces yet. Now, to give it those edges, simply under the mirror modifier, press this button and select apply. And now if we go into the edit mode, now you can see that both sides of these objects now have their own edges and faces. Alright, great. Now that we took care of this, what we need to do next is following. Let's simply select all the edges that are in the center, at the middle of our object. Okay, like this. Okay. Now, we need to split these edges into two. So, to do that, let's select this bevel tool and let's pull this yellow dot to split these edges. Next, we need to select the loop cut and add a new set of edges between these two circles of edges we just made. What we will do next is this. Let's select the move tool and let's select the points. Now select all the points that are at the top of this sword and slightly pull them down to get this interesting shape for our sword. After you did that, select all the points that are at the sides of this blade. Now switch this to scale tool and scale these points down on the x-axis like this. And okay, now these points on the side of this sword are sinking into it as well. And this is just a nice additional detail that I believe makes this sword look better. And now we are going to add a tiny bit more decoration to this object. However, in order to nicely decorate this sword, we need to make sure that a new object we will add into our scene will appear right in the middle of this sword. And in order to do that, we need to move 3D cursor back into the middle of this sword. To do that, press Shift S and select cursor to selected, and that is going to move 3D cursor right here at the center of this object. Alright, now let's add a new cube. Place it around here like this. Okay, here. And now let's go into the edit mode. And now we are going to turn this cube into a nice decoration for this sword. We are going to turn this cube into a new arrow that is going to stick out of our blade. So select this face, move it here like this. Select this face here, pull it slightly up. Okay, like this. Now what we need to do next is this. Add a loop cut and cut this object in half. Select these 2 points, these 2 edges, move them a tiny bit down. Okay, now next, let's select add new loop cut somewhere around here. And let's add a new loop cut here, really close to these first loop cuts we made. And now what we need to do next is this. Select these 2 faces, scale them down on the x-axis to make this arrow-like shape. Okay, and now select this edge and this one here. Move these edges up, okay, like this. And now select these 2 edges, scale them down on the x-axis to make this arrow sharper. And okay, now this arrow should go up a tiny bit. So let's select all these points and pull them up. And now we need to improve the shape of this arrow, especially at the bottom. So let's add a new set of edges with loop cut around here. And let's also add another set of edges and bring it really close to here, to this set of edges we just made. Now select this face and this face, pull them apart with the scale tool like this. Now our mesh is clipping a little bit through our mesh is clipping a bit. Now to fix that issue, simply select this edge and slightly pull them up. Now select these 2 faces, pull them apart like this. Okay, maybe not so much. And now next, select these 2 edges, move them down like this. And actually, why not? Let's select these 2 points down, pull them up. Okay, to make this nice arrow coming out of this object. And okay, now to make this arrow look cool, we are going to add this bevel modifier, increase the segments to 3. We are going to play with the amount, give this object smooth shading. Now next, let's add a mirror modifier. Let's select our blade as the mirror object, play with axes, so that this arrow appears on the other side. And okay, maybe pull this down a tiny bit. And okay, now we have this interesting and cool sword. Now guys, one last thing I would like to change on this sword are these handles on its sides. I don't like how these objects look, so I'm just going to delete them, and I'm going to replace these handles with something else, because I think it's a little cheap that we just duplicated this object and placed it here. We can do better than that. Now for the handles on these sides of this sword, we are going to add a simple cube and place it somewhere around here on the sides. Now we are simply going to go into the edit mode. Make sure you have selected all points, all faces by pressing A. Now let's scale these faces down with S. Select this face here and pull it into this sword. Okay. Now with this, select this face and use extrude region tool to pull this face out here. Now next select loop cut, add one loop cut here and one loop cut here. Okay, like this. Now it's time to reshape these objects. Open the X-ray mode, select these 4 points and scale them, pull them apart with the scale tool. Now select these 2 points, move them here, okay, like this. Okay, this might be a tiny bit too big, so let's select these points, pull them a tiny bit closer to one another. Now let's move these 2 points here closer to these points here. And now pull these points slightly to the back. Okay, like this. And now what we need to do next, we need to make an opening on this object. So select these faces here and these ones here at the back. And now use this insert face tool to make new faces here in the middle. Disable the X-ray mode. Press right click and delete these faces. And now we just need to close this hole. Select these 2 points, press F to merge them. And now just keep going, keep selecting the edges, pressing F to merge them. Okay, just go nice and steady like this. And okay. Now let's return into the object mode. Next we are going to immediately add bevel modifier, increase segments to 3, add smooth shading, and let's play with the amount here. Okay, like this. Now let's add mirror modifier, select this handle as the mirror object so that this appears on the other side of our sword. And now we are going to quickly fill up this hole. So to do that, let's add a new cube. Place it somewhere around here. Go into the edit mode, scale this cube down. Okay, and what we need to do next is this. Add a loop cut on this angle, open the X-ray mode. And now we just need to reshape a bunch of points. So move these points here, move these points here, move this point here, these points here, and these points move somewhere around here. Okay, like this. And now to add a few additional details, let's add a loop cut on this angle. Okay, like this. Now select this point here and this point here, and now press S to scale these points up. Okay, to make a tiny small little bump here. Okay, we are going to slightly pull these faces into this object, and we will also scale these 2 points down so that they're not clipping through this object. And okay, this is going to look good. Now let's add a mirror modifier, select this handle as the mirror object, and let's actually quickly see how does this look with the bevel modifier. Smooth shading. Actually, I don't like how this looks, so let's delete this bevel modifier by pressing X. And let's give this object once again flat shading. And okay, now we have this pretty decent sword. And with this, we have reached the end of this tutorial. Congratulations guys, you have just learned the most important features and tools of the edit mode that will allow you to make all sorts of beautiful objects and models. I hope you are going to put the knowledge I gave you to good use, and if you liked this tutorial, please like, share and subscribe, and see ya guys in the next video. Bye!